Hey guys, it's Logan here with Hydra572. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Byrd CaraCara 2 in G10. Now I see this being used as a true blue EDC blade. That means that mostly you're going to be using it for your utility cutting tasks, but it is large enough and sturdy enough that you could use it defensively if you needed to. Pricing, it is $33.50 plus shipping and handling on Blade HQ, and 65 cents cheaper on eBay, but you don't have to pay for shipping and handling. The blade profile, as you guys can see, is very similar to that of the Spyderco Endura. Byrd is a Chinese line of knives produced by Spyderco. The tip, I think a little bit more upsweep would be nice. As you can see here near the tip, they actually interrupt this line that goes along the whole back of the blade, and they bring it down just a little bit. And I wish they hadn't done that, because if the tip was upswept just a little bit better, I feel that that would be superior for utility cutting tasks. It's not a problem, and you guys probably can't even see it, but a little bit of upsweep would have made it a much better utility cutter tip, in my opinion. It's a minimal gripe, though. The belly, the swept portion of the blade, is minimal, but I think it'll be fine. Like I said, very similar to the Endura, which many people love as their EDC blade. As you guys can see there, not a whole lot of the blade would be engaged if your knuckles were down on a surface and you needed to be engaging in a cut, but it is a very easily sharpenable blade profile, what with the minimal curvature, so that's fine, I suppose. The steel is Spyderco's 8CR13 MOV, identical, I believe, to the Tenacious and Resilience line of knives. However, I think I got a little bit worse retention out of this steel than those knives. That could have to do with the edge geometry, though. The sharpening was very easy. The grind, well, the relief edge was sloppy. It looks as if when the relief edge was being put on the knife, it was skipped across a belt of a low grit, and then the higher grit belts didn't completely smooth it out. It's not a smooth grind line. That's more of a QC issue, though. The actual grind of the blade, well, we have a full flat grind with a portion that you could clamp onto if you needed to for a consistent angle sharpener. Up here near the pivot, it is pretty uniform. I think you could get it in a clamp with no problem. You wouldn't have to pat it out the way that you would on a true full flat ground knife that's got no place that you could clamp. So that's nice. That's a pretty good utility worker knife type blade profile. Deployment, well, we have the Byrd wing hole thing. That's really your only option. Doing that. I did have a zip tie on here, did the zip tie wave modification before the review, and that was working good enough. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. As for your rotational openings, spidey hole, all that, not easy because the deployment on this blade isn't very smooth. I've got it a little bit loose right now just because I got tired of trying to mess with it, but as loose as it is, it still doesn't deploy very smoothly. There's just a lot of resistance. It doesn't snap out of the handle, and that's with so much blade play that it does irritate me, so that is another quality control issue. It got a little bit better. I took the knife apart and cleaned it, and there was some pretty significant metal and grime in there. It was not cleaned very well prior to assembly, and that was affecting the deployment. But even now that it's very clean and oiled, it's not the smoothest deploying blade, and that's with a lot of blade play. So that is a serious detractor from this knife, in my opinion. The lock, we have a back lock with a Bowie dent, and much as I love back locks and much as I love Spyderco, the more I try, I just don't like the way that Spyderco does a backlock. I know they're trying some new things in 2014, what with the power lock, and supposedly they completely redid the way they do a backlock for the Native 5, and we'll talk about those as they come through my review queue, but so far I just haven't really had a Spyderco backlock that knocked me out, and this one is no exception. Like I said, not particularly smooth. Now that I cleaned it, the actuation of the lock bar is easy enough. It wasn't. It was pretty grimy, too, when I got it right out of the box. Another quality control issue. Play, well, we've got too much to really be tolerable in a knife that costs any decent amount of money. And so yeah, that's a bummer. Both forward to back and side to side. I think even somebody who wasn't a blade play snob would look at this and recognize what I was talking about. The handle material is G10, and it is cool to get a knife that's very similar to the Endura in a different handle material. I do appreciate that. That's what made me want to check out this blade, because I like G10 more than I like FRN. It's just a preference of mine. They're both perfectly strong enough, and with the bidirectional texturing that Spyderco does, there's actually probably a little bit more grip on the texture of their FRN. I just like the feel of G10 in hand. The liners are steel. They are a decent thickness. I think they look very tasteful, and they are milled out, skeletonized to save weight. Onto the ergonomics, they are pretty good actually. I like the ergonomics of this blade a little bit better than I like them on the Enduras that I've handled, minus this forward finger choil. I don't really need it. I'm never going to choke up on the knife that much just to get a little bit of extra finesse in a cut. I actually feel more comfortable back here on the handle. Again, it's just a preference, but everyone that I've had hold this blade has agreed with me that getting really forward on it doesn't make the cut feel more exact, anything like that, and I'd prefer to have that extra ½ inch or so of cutting edge that we could have had. The jimping is okay. It's not very tacky, but it's a well-designed thumb ramp, and it's not very abrasive on your thumb. It's not digging into your thumb, and it complements the ergonomics pretty well. It's more saved by the thumb ramp than by the jimping itself, and this is below Spyderco's usually excellent standard for jimping, in my opinion. The clip is 4-way reversible, and it's the hourglass clip that you guys know I like. However, usually Spyderco has a little seated-in segment for a clip to go on a knife like this. I guess that's not right. The Tenacious and Resilience don't have them. What I'm getting at is that this clip isn't very secure. It does wobble quite a bit from side to side. I believe that's partially because the holes for the screws on the clip aren't particularly well milled out, and that means that you can't sink them down in very tight, and that provides some mobility. But something about the clip isn't right because it moves around, and that does influence the ergonomics as well. If the clip gets pushed back like that, it digs into your hand significantly more than that little adjustment up. Also, after I purchased the knife, 2 of the clip screws were very loose, to the point that one of them fell out, and another one completely stripped out of its hole. So I don't think the holes for the the clip screws were machined very well. And that's another significant bummer. It made the knife uncarryable for me for a number of weeks. I contacted Spyderco, and they did not respond to my email. I eventually talked to them when I went down to the outlet, and they took care of me right away. I'm not sure what the issue was there, because whenever I'm in the Spyderco outlet, inevitably somebody calls with a warranty concern or an I need a clip or an I need my knife sharpened type concern, and Spyderco gets right on it, and they have good customer service over the phone. So I guess what I'm saying is their email service was non-satisfactory, but if you need to talk to them, you will want to talk to them onto the phone. Onto the presentation. The lines on this knife actually aren't that good. They certainly aren't perfect. As you guys can see there's a small gap between this portion of the finger choil and the blade stock itself. Other than that, presentation is fine, I guess. The forward finger choil itself isn't really symmetrical. These are pretty petty gripes. You'd have to be looking at the knife closely to see them. Other than that, G10 with a good satin polished blade, you know, it looks fine. Some visible grind lines, as you guys can see, but I think it looks pretty tasteful. On to quality, well, it's just lame. I already talked about the pocket clip screws, what with the stripping and the falling out, and that was a significant detractor because it made the knife uncarryable for me. Other than that, the deployment and the play also just aren't competitive with other knives that cost this much money and have a similar philosophy of use. I just don't think this particular knife competes. I've got friends on Instagram and on YouTube who have a Byrd CaraCara 2 in G10, and they love it, and they've never mentioned any quality concerns. It's possible that the model that I got was just a lemon, and even with the quality concerns, it is still a usable blade. I just don't think it competes with other Chinese-produced knives that cost about this much money. So on to value, the machining is just too bad in my opinion. The materials are fine. Something that I didn't mention back in presentation, we actually have a milled out backspacer here that I think adds a really nice touch to this knife. I think it makes it very tasteful, gives it a little touch that we don't typically see in just the rampant sea of black G10 and satin polished blades, so that is nice. The competition is really what kills this blade for me. And I've said for a long time that Spyderco has this bad habit of really competing hard against their own models of knives, and that's true here too. So for about the same amount of money, we can get a Spyderco Tenacious, which in my mind is a much better EDC knife. If you have the issue that I had where the finger choil is a little bit sharp on the G10, the ergonomics might not be so good, but I think the blade profile is better, certainly better edge geometry, better machining all around. Same thing goes, a little bit more expensive, but a larger knife for the Spyderco Resilience. I think this one has better ergonomics, less prone for that choil problem that I was talking about. I think it's a better blade in general. If you're willing to spend a little bit more money, you can get the Native, which is a better EDC blade than any that we've mentioned so far, and again, for nearly the same amount of money, you can get the Centafonte, and that is a better blade, I think, as well. Similarly sized, a little bit smaller, as you can see there, but I think better ergonomics, certainly a better blade steel. So as we typically see, quite a bit of infighting on the Spyderco line, a whole bunch of their knives competing for the same spot, and that's fine. It doesn't look too good on the Byrd, CaraCara 2, and G10. There are other Spydercos that I would recommend that you buy over it, like everyone that I just showed you. And that doesn't even really speak to the other companies that are producing knives that give the CaraCara 2 some serious competition. Here's the Rat 1, and then here's a couple of Kershaw offerings. Here we have the Freefall and the Clash. And maybe it's just that I'm turned off of this knife because of the quality concerns. Like I said, it is a comfortable knife with a good blade profile for EDC. I just can't really heartily recommend it the way that I can these other blades, and the quality control concerns are probably a big part of that. If you don't get a knife that has those concerns, you may love your CaraCara 2, however you choose to say it. I just don't really see it stacking up to the other competition. So for pass-fail, I'm going to pull the indifferent card on this one. I'm not digging it. I have used it for some pretty significant work, and it held up well. Like I said, the retention wasn't really there, but I think that's an edge geometry problem that you could fix if you were willing to reprofile it. The handle is nice, and it's good to see an Endura style of knife from the people who make the Endura with different handle scale options. And I tend to love Spyderco's 8CR13 just because it's so sharpenable, but with the quality control issues on mine, I'm just indifferent. Somebody might pick up this knife and not have a problem with its mechanicals. I do think it has too much play, and it doesn't deploy smoothly enough. The handle clip screw is certainly a problem because I can't carry a knife with no pocket clip. I can, but I won't because I prefer the security of knowing where my knife is. So, pass-fail, indifferent. I'm not recommending that you don't buy the blade. I just want to warn you guys because I feel like it would be dishonest to say that this knife is awesome when mine has had some pretty significant quality control issues. On to specs, overall length of 8.5 inches, and it does seem smaller than that. As you guys saw, other knives that I tend to think of as being decently sized for EDC, like the Centafonte, do look a tad small next to it, so it is a larger EDC blade. Some people would say it's too large for them. The people at the Spyderco outlet have told me that the Endura, frequently when they sell one, somebody calls them and says, "This is too large for me, I can't use it." Maybe I just don't see that because I'm a knife nut, and certainly I see that people have their prerogative to carry a smaller knife. I think this is an optimal size for an EDC blade, actually. The blade length is 3.75 inches, could be a little bit more cutting edge if we would have utilized that finger choil area that isn't really being used for anything by anyone, I don't think. The handle length is 4.75 inches, blade thickness, it's an 1/8 of an inch stock, and it does narrow pretty quickly with that full flat grind. And the weight is 4.25 ounces, a little bit on the heavy side for some people's EDC. I couldn't give two shits if I tried. So yeah, a cool enough blade, and like I said, I dig the ergonomics, I dig where they were going with the blade profile, not really digging on the finger choil, and I do like the decorative backspacer. The clip is a little bit low quality for me, as are some various distractions, what with that gap up there, and the bevel grind being uneven, the relief edge, I mean. So I do have some concerns, and the general overall lack of quality can be seen throughout the blade. Another area is looking into the maw of the lock. You can see that the back part of the blade stock was machined very oddly, almost as if it was cut on a cutting wheel of some sort, leaving enormous marks in there. They're not grind lines from a belt. There's some sort of other cutting tool leaving those marks. So those are all minor concerns, I suppose. But basically what it amounts to is that this knife doesn't compete in terms of quality with some of the other offerings for a similar amount of money. And that's too bad, because it definitely does compete in terms of design, blade profile, so on and so forth. So pretty much just an Achilles heel of quality on this blade. And mine might be a lemon, yours might not be that way, but I'm not going to be able to buy 10 copies of each knife like this that I want to review. I have to go off just the one. So there you have it. Maybe a lukewarm recommendation. If you're interested in it and you're willing to brave the quality control issues, perhaps if you're not satisfied with the quality of yours, you could go through a warranty claim. I couldn't be bothered to do it. Overall, not really an average blade, but a blade that's knocked down to an average standing by some quality control issues. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more of the same.